Welcome to A Shot in the Arm podcast. I'm Ben Plumley, and this is the podcast about innovation and equity in global health. Well, we're here in Denver on the sidelines of the premier infectious disease science conference, CROI, the Conference on Retroviruses and Opportunistic Infections. And I'm particularly excited because our guest today is someone I've been trying to get on the show for quite a while. She's one of the most important people in the HIV movement, I think, at the moment. It's Deborah Waterhouse, the CEO of ViiV Healthcare. Welcome to A Shot in the Arm, Deborah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, there's a lot to cover, but before we really dive into it, here we are at CROI. I wanted to get your thoughts on something that happened last night, opening session. And as always, they have a community leader presenting. It's the Martin Delaney presentation. And this year was a friend of the pod, Frank Mugisha, who is the founder of Sexual Minorities Uganda and has been leading the fight against the really draconian legislation in Uganda. And of course, now it's spread to Ghana and elsewhere. And the terrible thing that happened was that just as he got up to speak, literally hundreds of delegates decided to walk out. And I don't think there was a deliberate part on their move, more that, it was sort of crass insensitivity. But I wondered what you and ViiV made of that. And given the company's long heritage of really being part of the broad DNA of the HIV movement, what that sort of says to you.
Well, what I can say is that myself and my team certainly stayed put. And we were discussing this morning how powerful and impactful that part of the opening ceremony was. As you've said, around the world, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, we've seen some backward steps being taken on the ability for people who wish to be in same-sex relationships to have those relationships either recognized through marriage. There's been some steps back on that, or even at the most draconian end of things, which we've seen happen in Uganda and other places where actually you've seen same-sex relationships outlawed. And that is extremely disappointing. Part of what I spend my life at GSK doing is I'm the head of the LGBT plus council, and we have a very dynamic spectrum chapter. We have a real core part of our culture, both at ViiV and GSK, which is about truly being you. And so we feel every day that we as a company need to make sure that we're standing up for what we believe in. We believe, obviously, that, people should be allowed to live the life that they want to live. And we make that a core part of who we are and how we work. And we attract incredible talent as a result of that. And actually people stay a long time with the company because they feel, and I feel this way too, that it's a place where you can truly, truly be yourself and do your best work and thrive.
And, if you look at the mission of ViiV to, be around when the virus goes, when you get rid of the virus, it must be really frustrating to see these sort of retrograde steps when, if you are criminalizing or recriminalizing people most affected by the virus, it's going to make the end of AIDS that much tougher, isn't it?
It is. And what we do is three things, really. We focus on the science to make sure that we're listening to the community and bringing to them medicines, both for the treatment of HIV and for the prevention, that actually ensure that they can thrive and live the life that they want to live. So our pipeline and our products today actually are built on patient insight. The second thing we do is we work very closely with the community all over the world, many smaller community groups across sub-Saharan Africa, some in the US, some in Europe and in other places, so that we're touching the community at a grassroots level and ensuring that our grants and our funding flows into those areas. And it's been 30 years actually since our positive action group was set up, and we have distributed millions and millions of pounds to the places where at a local level it makes a phenomenal difference. The third thing we do is we tackle stigma. It's amazing to think that in 1988, if you were diagnosed with HIV, your life expectancy was about 18 months. Today, if you're diagnosed and you take your medication, you will live the same length of life as somebody that's not living with HIV. That's an incredible scientific journey we've been on. And yet, for the many, many years I've been working in infectious diseases and HIV, I don't think stigma has changed as significantly as it should or could do. And so we spend an enormous amount of time tackling stigma through very public campaigns. So we've done some partnerships with Shutterstock to actually ensure there's a bank of images of people living with HIV that are vibrant and healthy and incredible, instead of being what people might have perceived people living with HIV. We've got an amazing partnership with Gareth Thomas, the rugby player. We take an enormous double-decker bus into rugby grounds. We were at the Rugby World Cup. We go all over the UK. And it's a way of educating people about HIV, how one could acquire it and what you could do to prevent it, but also the benefit of being tested. And we're tackling and challenging stigma in places where you wouldn't normally find people talking about those topics, and people are incredibly open. So there's a lot that we do to really challenge the perception of people living with HIV and to really put the positive perspective of them forward that we can.
It's very interesting that you specifically call out stigma, and I think you're right that we really haven't done an adequate job over these last 30 years of tackling stigma. And the same is true in a way for prevention. You look at the global figures, the rates or the numbers of new infected really don't vary much year over year. And that sort of gets us to the science. So what is ViiV Healthcare up to here in Denver? What's being presented from some of the scientists that you're working with?
So we are presenting data on some of the products that are in the market today. Excuse me. So we've got oral 2-drug regimens. So we have developed oral 2-drug regimens as an alternative to oral 3-drug regimens because patients told us that over a lifetime they wanted to take less medicine. If you're diagnosed in your 20s, you will take medication until the end of your life, which is probably 30, 40, 50 years. So on that basis, if you can take 2 drugs, not 3, you cut the number of medicines you take, the doses you take, by about 36 to 40,000 doses, which is incredibly important. The second thing we are talking about is long-acting injectables for the treatment and prevention of HIV. This is really a way of reflecting patient insight, particularly connected to stigma. So many, many people are happy to take a tablet every day to suppress their virus. But actually, a significant proportion of people living with HIV are actually, they're not out to their friends and family, so they haven't declared their status, or they struggle to take that tablet every day, either because it's just one of those things in life that happens. You forget a dose, you miss a dose. And actually the pressure that puts on people's lives, because if you miss a dose, actually you could find yourself, rebounding from a viral suppression perspective. And that's not good for your health. And it could mean you become resistant to the tablets or the medicine that you're taking. But actually, it could also mean that you could pass the virus on to people that who are your sexual partner. So that is something that is very difficult for people. And the third thing is self-stigma. Every single day, taking that tablet reminds them of probably what was the worst day of their life, which was the day that they were diagnosed with HIV. And so the question from the community was, can we have something that's long-acting and really discreet? And that's what we've been talking about, our current medicines for the treatment of HIV administered every 2 months, but also our pipeline, which is offering the opportunity of a treatment every 4 months, maybe every 6 months. And there is a glimmer, there is a dream that we have that we could get to every 12 months. Yeah. And that would revolutionize treatment, but it would also revolutionize PrEP, because actually that means that you're not having again to take a tablet every day, but actually you could go and have your injection, and then you're covered for whatever eventuality happens in your life. And so that's what we're talking about at the Congress.
There's something very interesting, I think, about the long-acting technologies, in that they offer an opportunity to reach the hardly reached populations, particularly in the US, as a starting point.
Yep.
And another friend of the pod, Tommy Williams, who is a community liaison officer in Birmingham, Alabama, he's one of your patients.
Yep.
And, having, I think it's every 8 weeks now that he gets his injection in his bum. And this has been a life changer precisely because he's not being reminded of taking pills, reminded of his HIV status by taking pills every day. So that's really interesting. Can I ask you another question about CROI? What else is interesting to you? What are you seeing more broadly in the science that's raising your eyebrows?
So there is a lot of data on monoclonal antibodies, or broadly neutralizing antibodies, actually, as a potential for long-acting treatment. And they may also have a role in cure. So I'm very interested in the BNABs. I'm also always very interested in pediatrics. So our company's mission is to leave no person living with HIV behind. And actually the most underserved population globally is actually children. So there's a lot of data on kids in terms of the new kind of regimens and presentations that have been developed that are easy to take for even the youngest children. So I'm very excited about the progress that we're making there. And then obviously I go and sit in the cure sessions. That's the holy grail. Will we ever cure HIV? Well, probably not in the sense of a true cure. It's probably more a remission, a period over however many years where you could be treated and then you would just forget about your HIV. Yeah. And then a number of years later, you may come back for another treatment. And so that's the stuff that really excites me. And so those are the areas I've been kind of jumping in and out of all day today. And I've got my little book with the sessions all marked down, and I'll be going to see the posters later, and I'll be in all the sessions tomorrow. And then there's a study, and you mentioned, the US particularly. There's a session on Wednesday, which is a new study by the ACTG group, and they have studied in the hardest to treat population, what impact would long-acting have? And that, I think, is going to be a real game changer, because in the US, I think, at the moment, you've got about 70% of people virally suppressed who are living with HIV, but 30% are not. They fall in and out of care, and that is really tough for them. But it's also, challenging from a public health perspective as well. And so this study is actually talking about the utilization of long-acting to help us reach those people who really struggle to adhere for a whole set of different reasons. So that I'm very excited about the latitude data on Wednesday morning.
Yeah, and indeed. Now, don't be fooled by my British accent, because as well, one of my other hats is as chair of the San Francisco Community Health Center. And it's the sort of premier health delivery service for people living in the Tenderloin, homeless, mentally ill. A lot of HIV. And for both prevention and treatment, long-acting has been an incredible lifesaver, because you come to get the injection, you're not carrying your medication around for you. So I agree there's something very interesting about long-acting technology for those populations that, as one of my colleagues says, are hardly reached.
Hardly reached, but yet actually last year at CROI, one of the most exciting presentations that I attended was Monica Gandhi, who was presenting the data on the population from San Francisco, who she had gathered together and had studied in terms of the impact of long-acting. She started that journey, and Latitude builds on that knowledge. And I think this is going to be a very important evolution of where we see long-acting being used and making a contribution to ending the epidemic in the US, which of course is a bipartisan objective that's been set for the US, where, viral suppression rates are a lot lower than in other wealthy countries.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I was thinking of calling this podcast All About ViiV, and that's a sort of slight pun on the All About Eve movie. And maybe some folks will get it, maybe some folks won't. but it really sort of is about the people. And you've referred to the way in which ViiV has attracted really many leaders from the community and science into the company. And of course, to the HIV community, people like Sean Mellors are a particular foundational leader for us. And I just wanted to see if you could tell us your story of how you got into this, because you are not a scientist, are you?
No, so I am a commercial leader by background. That's how I came to join the pharmaceutical industry. But for me, I wanted a career that was focused on making an impact on humanity, and healthcare seemed like a good place to start. And I've worked in many different parts of the world, the US, Australia, New Zealand, Central and Eastern Europe, the UK, other parts of Europe. And wherever I go, the question I ask is, what's the maximum impact that we can make on the health of others? And that's why I work for GSK, because at the heart of that company is prevention with our vaccines, prevention when treatment is prevention, and we're an infectious disease company. So for me, the fit was very good. And I came into the HIV space in the late 90s, when we just started to have a highly active antiretroviral treatment, which was a very exciting moment to come in, but there was still a lot to do. And for me, it was a true opportunity to, impact human health at a time when this virus had presented so many challenges to us. It is one of the trickiest, if not the trickiest virus humanity has ever faced into.
Do you think that HIV has changed the dynamics of healthcare, whether it's patient, doctor, health policymaker, all of them with the pharmaceutical manufacturer or the insurance company, depending on how it all works in whatever country? And do you see that as a transformation that will drive healthcare more broadly, or do you think of it more as a sort of an historical accident that will be restricted to the HIV field?
No, I think it's a pathfinder for other diseases. So in HIV, the reason I love working in this area so much is because it is community coming together to deliver a common goal, and that is to end an epidemic. And so the partnership, the collaboration, the connectivity between global funders, pharmaceutical companies, industry, healthcare professionals, and of course, community, because without community, we can't move forward at all. And so I think it is a brilliant example that actually a lot of the ways in which we operate as a collaborative and connected community were actually really fundamental to the way we, at a global level, faced into COVID. But I also see that same collaborative approach being taken with TB. So I'm the CEO of ViiV Healthcare, but I also wear the hat of president of global health for GSK. So I work in the TB space, the malaria space. And I think HIV has really set up a model where collaboration shows and has the best possible impact on the outcomes for human health. So I think it has been critical.
So I want to get on to the global health side of things in just a second, but I realize we haven't explained just what a strange beast ViiV is, because you are the CEO of that company, but you're also part of the senior leadership team of the big pharmaceutical company, GSK. And ViiV also has other pharmaceutical shareholders. So how does it all work?
Yes, so we have 3 shareholders. The majority shareholder is GSK, but we also have Pfizer and Shionogi as our other shareholders. We have a board, we have a chairman. And so we operate separately, if you like, from GSK. But at the same time, we have a wonderful relationship with them, because what we do is we're 100% focused on delivering medicines to prevent and treat HIV. That's all we do. We live and breathe every single day to do that. And we have a mighty set of employees, incredibly talented, passionate people. But actually, what we're able to do is pull on the sort of the infrastructure of GSK for our manufacturing. They execute our clinical trials. They register all of our intellectual property. So they, if you like, hold a massive orange umbrella above our head so that we can get on with what we're here for. And that is to make sure that no person living with HIV is left behind, and that one day we are able to end this epidemic.
And Pfizer and Shionogi are okay with that? With GSK providing the orange umbrella?
They are, because we pay them for their services.
Right.
So actually, it works out financially very well. And so what I have to do is make sure that we deliver against the needs of our shareholder from a financial perspective. And in return, we run ViiV in the way that we have chosen to do from day one, and that is as follows. In high-income countries, we strike agreements with governments and payers to give access to our medicines. In middle-income countries, we have high-volume, low-per-unit value tenders so that Brazil and countries like that have access to our medicines. And then in low-income countries, we actually give our intellectual property to the medicine patent pool, and they give licenses to generic manufacturers. What that means is today, 24 million people are on a dolutegravir-based regimen. And that means that if you're in Kinshasa or in Denver, in London, or in Sacramento, actually, you're probably on the same medicine. And that was all done extremely quickly so that there is an equality of equity. And so that's how the company runs. And our shareholders are very happy with that because it's the heart of who we are. But that's where we can attract in the incredible talent that we're able to. And so it becomes a virtuous cycle of talent, delivery of the financials, but the do well and the do good comes together, which I think is a really magical, situation to be in.
And the dolutegravir access story is absolutely a success story. And, as I travel and meet colleagues and friends around the world, it's a dolutegravir-based regimen. Just a slightly cheeky way of approaching the access question now, Deborah. CAB-LA has been a slightly different experience for the company in that as soon as you got first approvals, particularly in the US, and I remember your head of R&D, Kim Smith, saying to me that sort of happened a little too rapidly, a little quicker than you'd anticipated. But you then made the usual commitment to work with the patent pool and others to do the tech transfer for the licensing of the CAB-LA product. But of course, it's an injectable, and the manufacturing process is so much different from manufacturing a pill. And some commentators have said that, perhaps you should have known earlier that there was going to be such interest in CAB-LA, and how could we sort of concertina, if you like, the movement from getting approvals, giving the licenses, and then helping the tech transfer happen? Because some have said we may not see the fruits of these tech transfers until up to 5 years. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on how that has gone.
So we got the US license, and then the next 7 countries that secured licenses were all in sub-Saharan Africa, which we were supporting. We actually licensed Australia slightly before those sub-Saharan African licenses, because Australia was the reference country. So the licensure was very quick. We gave licenses to the 3 generic manufacturers through the medicines patent pool faster than any licenses have ever been issued before. And so that part of the process was very quick. But we always knew, because of the complicated manufacturing process, that it was going to take a while for the generics to come on board. So we then said we would provide our long-acting prevention at a not-for-profit price, and Global Fund and PEPFAR worked in partnership with us. And so they are currently purchasing at a not-for-profit price everything that we can manufacture. And in fact, the first 23 vials left our factory in October on a big lorry headed towards sub-Saharan Africa. And then many hundreds of thousands of doses will be provided this year, and that will increase next year and the year after. And we'll keep on supplying at that not-for-profit price until the generic manufacturers are able to step in.
And of course, I suppose that will limit to some degree the penetration, if you like, of the long-acting. That's an unfortunate phrase of describing the action of a long-acting, but getting that into people around, in sub-Saharan Africa. that will slow things down. But I wonder actually if what you're doing is, another slight cheeky question coming, are you laying the groundwork for the Gilead long-acting that's sort of coming up behind you? Or do you feel that what you're learning in terms of tech transfer, in terms of helping companies, your generic partners, learn how to manufacture long-acting products at scale, is that something that is going to be beneficial to you, do you think, in the longer term?
So I think at the moment, we are introducing a brand new therapy into sub-Saharan Africa. And actually, that takes quite a long time. So at the moment, we're doing implementation studies, which is what many governments have asked for. And then after those have read out, the volume demand will then come after those studies have read out. So actually, at the moment, we're supplying large volumes, both for the studies and for some programmatic implementation. But actually, the supply and the demand at the moment are not significantly mismatched. And we're just waiting to see how that demand evolves over time. I think it is very important that generic manufacturers know how to make, and we're doing the tech transfer, long-acting medicines. And the key thing that I would say is we have a long-acting medicine to prevent HIV in our hands today. Our competitors are coming, but they don't have their phase 3 studies out yet. So we've got no idea how that may play out. So what I have is something in our hand, which we then will work very hard to get into low-income countries. And if something else comes along, which is another choice and another option, then that's fantastic, because the more choices people have, the better. Oral PrEP is still there. The dapivirine ring is available. The long-acting injectables that we manufacture are available. And then let's see what our competitors decide to do in the future. But we've always had our commitment to leaving no person living with HIV behind. And now we're stretching that into the PrEP world as well.
Well, I know that my co-host on A Shot in the Arm, Yvette Raphael, will give you a gold badge because you mentioned the dapivirine ring as part of what she works on, the choice agenda. So I think you've absolutely captured it. And in fact, CAB-LA came out in the middle of an extraordinary moment in human history, the COVID pandemic. And with your broader global health hat on, I got to say, I was profoundly depressed and disappointed that calls for vaccine equity for the COVID vaccine sort of didn't really happen. And we had vaccine populism, vaccine nationalism, and it seemed that the really hard-earned lessons that we had over the last 20 years for HIV, when push came to shove, didn't get applied. How did you see that experience?
So I felt that there was definitely not equity, and that we need to do better in the future. And I think that's why now you're seeing more of a movement towards ensuring that manufacturing is set up in sub-Saharan Africa, so that you've got the opportunity to produce vaccines and medicines actually in the continent itself, rather than having to have it imported in from other places. So I think we've learned some very important lessons. I think we've also learned a lot about humanity, because actually in places where the vaccine was available, there was all sorts of myths and concerns. And in fact, the uptake wasn't as good as it could or should have been either. So there was something about supply, but there was something about demand as well that we've learned a lot about during COVID. And I believe that next time, actually, we will be better prepared to ensure there is a greater level of global equity. But I hope that we will also communicate more effectively about the benefits.
Now, it's very interesting that you say that, because one of the things about COVID was the emergence of this really extraordinary disinformation, misinformation that was really amplified by digital and social media and other networks. Now, of course, in the HIV field, we've seen that for many, many years, but it's always been on a fairly small scale. But now we're really at the point where we are potentially seeing large swathes of populations really being impacted and influenced by misinformation, and it sort of feeds into their own distrust of health facilities, health providers, and others. Now, a shot in the arm is actually a project of the Global Listening Project, which was founded by Professor Heidi Larson. She's the founder of the Vaccine Confidence Project. We've just actually had a couple of roundtables in Japan, and some of your colleagues, your GSK colleagues, were there with us. And here's the thing I want to get your thoughts on. It's not enough to try and instigate public awareness campaigns to tackle dis and misinformation. It's how you encourage people after that to go and get their vaccinations. And, GSK has an RSV vaccine. Last year we were all looking at trying to have the triple dose approach, flu, RSV, and COVID vaccine. How do we move, do you think, from tackling confidence to getting people to go to clinics and getting their vaccines?
I mean, human beings are perverse in many senses because we spent all that time desperately wanting to protect ourselves and our children, and vaccines is, after clean water, the best public health intervention that we have at a global level. And so it's disappointing that some misinformation and distrust has evolved over time. People need to be able to make their own choice when it comes to how they, manage the health of their body, the health of their family. So I would never be in favor of compulsory, vaccination at all or anything like that. But I do think that having a consistent objective of building confidence in vaccines, so then people make a choice with the right information in their hands, rather than believing some of the misinformation, which then leads them to make a choice that could damage the health of themselves or their family. And for example, in the UK, as you may know, we've had big measles outbreaks, whooping cough, diseases that vaccination prevents. And actually, that's very, very damaging to the health of kids and the health of, adults. So for me, it's a case of continuing to communicate, continuing to push back against the misinformation, but also there's a peer-to-peer piece, which is all about, how friends and family talk about this stuff, making sure that we're sticking up for the right thing for the health of ourselves and our families.
Yeah, and so in a very, very small way, I think that's something that podcasts a little bit like this can help deal with.
I agree.
But also, these short clips that young people are making themselves. And we did a bit of work with some teenage girls and young women in Lagos and in Nairobi. And they themselves are creating content, saying to their friends and peers, come on,
exactly,
we got to get on top of this. And
peer-to-peer is so powerful.
Now, we're recording this at the beginning of March. International Women's Day is on the 8th.
Mm-hmm.
You, like Emma Walmsley, like a number of other women, are now chief executives of pharmaceutical companies that perhaps you might have thought, I don't know, even 10 years ago were still very much a bastion of male leadership. And I just wondered if you had any reflections, here we are in March, how you got there and what advice you would give to other young women beginning their careers in the pharmaceutical industry.
That is a great question. I mean, I think I'd start with the fact that I joined a company that really has never put any barriers in the way of my success. I could be me, I could be the person, the authentic individual that I wanted to be. And actually, I've had every opportunity to work all over the world, to take on many different breadth and depth assignments. And as a result, I've been able to grow as a leader and grow in terms of my experience and knowledge. So I think if I were starting my career again, I'd make sure that I chose a company that had the culture that connected to me, the purpose, the mission that connected to me. But also, as part of that, it would be important to know that there were lots of senior female role models. And actually, the company had the culture that allowed me to be myself and allowed me to thrive. So that's the advice that I would give to people who are starting their career today. And then the second thing I would say is I mentor a lot of younger women. And what I see is still a little less confidence maybe than some of their male peers. And so I would say, shut that voice in your head up that tells you you're not good enough, or maybe you're not quite ready, or that promotion may, not be the right thing for you, and just go for it. Be the authentic, amazing leader that you aspire to be, and have that confidence to be the best version of yourself. And if you can shut that voice in your head up that tells you that's not the right pathway for you, then that will be a massive, massive step forward.
I mean, this I've got to say has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. And, to my mind, you stand head and shoulders above many who happen to be male leaders of companies in this industry. And I do wonder about the importance of culture in encouraging and opening doors. And that's not something that might be whisked away by the whims of any particular political movement or moment. I think that's very, very interesting. I've got one last question. So A Shot in the Arm celebrates 5 years in April this year. And when I started off the podcast, I tried to round it off in a sort of nice, light way with a question that I thought was, generally applicable to everybody around the world. And I discovered very rapidly that it wasn't. But I'm going to try it out on you, if that's okay.
Yes, I'm feeling slight trepidation at this, but go for it.
Deborah Waterhouse, what is your favorite Pet Shop Boys song?
Oh, that's easy. West End Girls.
There we are, you see?
Oh, that was easy. I thought it was going to be something kind of deep, meaningful and controversial, but instead, the Pet Shop Boys it is.
Oh, fantastic. Have you ever seen them in concert?
I have seen them in concert, actually.
Yeah, me too. They're terrific.
Terrific. I'm more of an R&B girl, I have to say, generally, but there was a moment in time where kind of, probably when I was at university, that New Order and Pet Shop Boys and all of that amazing electro pop was de rigueur, which I fully immersed myself in. And I hope you did too.
Oh, totally. Well, you've made my day. Deborah,
thank you.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the podcast. You are a shot in the arm.
Thank you, Ben.
Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you to Deborah. Thank you to Melinda Stubby from ViiV Healthcare for her patience and perseverance in getting this podcast finally sorted. Thanks to Eric Espera, our director and producer from Newsdoc Media. Waisha Raphael is our production coordinator. And thanks to Josiah, our filmmaker extraordinaire here in Denver, Colorado. A Shot in the Arm podcast is a project, as I said, of the Global Listening Project. Don't forget, you can find us on all good podcast platforms and on our YouTube and Spotify channels. Don't forget to subscribe and give us 5 stars. Have a great week and a safe week, everyone.